Hello, I'm Dr. Pinsikowski, and I wanted to give you a brief overview of a really exciting opportunity post-graduation. Fulbright, as you see here in the first slide, we're going to talk about engaging with the world, grants for study, research, or teaching assistantships abroad. So if you've ever thought about studying and working abroad, and here you actually get paid by the U.S. government, Fulbright is the right grant for you. And I'm going to give you a brief overview of the type of grants and really the good chance that you have of receiving this type of grant. Fulbright started in 1946, created by U.S. Congress, really spearheaded by Senator William Fulbright, based off of a surplus of U.S. military supplies in Europe that had to be sold off or destroyed. And he thought, why don't we use this to create a type of soft diplomacy? And that really relates to the main goal of the Fulbright program, and that's to increase the mutual understanding between people of the United States and other people of countries through exchange. So whether you're teaching abroad or doing research abroad, really it comes down to creating this mutual understanding between peoples. It's sponsored by the U.S. Department of State, the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and it's administered by actually a private entity, IIE. And there's a U.S. commission and overseas partners. So each country has its own Fulbright commission. I'll go into a little more detail of that in a little bit. But if you ever think of major grants, and here we have statistics from 2017 and 2018, you really have a 1 in 5 chance if you finish the application of receiving a grant. And like I said, with this grant, you receive travel costs, housing costs, monthly allowance for food. So it's really type of housing if you were a graduate student. You wouldn't be living in a palace, but you're not suffering either. And if you look at the different regions, let's say you want to apply for a Fulbright grant in Africa. There are 80 projected grants in this particular year, and there were 674. So actually it was better than a 20% chance of getting a grant. So depending on the region of the world, and it varies from year to year because it's really dependent upon if countries request or make funds available for Fulbrighters from the United States to go to their home countries. So each year the type of grant and countries can change. The most popular region, of course, is in Europe, and I can tell you that Great Britain is the #1 place for U.S. students to apply. It's also the most difficult to get. So one thing you want to consider is, I often tell students you should think about where first and then what type of grant. And to be eligible for the Fulbright program, you have to be a U.S. citizen. You can be a dual citizen, even of the country that you would be going to. You have to be finished with your undergraduate studies, so you have to have at least a bachelor's degree by the start of the grant. You cannot have a PhD at the time of application. There are postdoctoral Fulbrights for different levels of research and study, but this is the student Fulbright program. And you may only apply for one program or grant type per competition year. And some grants actually have a proficiency requirement in the language of the host country. It really varies by country and by program. So one thing that I really recommend to students is, okay, am I fluent enough in German, and how many years do they want as part of the application? Some countries don't require proficiency in the language at all, but if you're not proficient in the language and they're requiring that, don't apply because it would automatically disqualify you. Successful grant writing often actually always entails following the directions exactly. So there are two types of Fulbright grants. There are the study research grants and the English Teaching Assistantship, or ETA. And study research grant really is how it's entitled. You can either do independent research. Let's say you've been working on a detailed research project here at Hood and you want to continue it, and you have a really good background, and it can be in any subject area, in the humanities and the sciences. And these awards are for 8 to 12 months, up to 140 countries. So it's either independent research, or you can actually apply to a foreign university for 2 semesters. With both of these grants, you see that they really want limited experience in the host country. If you've traveled or if you've even studied abroad in the country that you're applying to, that does not, Fulbright doesn't consider that to be a lot of experience with that. So if you've done that, you've studied abroad and you want to go back to, let's say, France and do research, do so. So English teaching assistantships, there's generally more of these type of grant awards, same amount of time. There's fewer countries, at least in this particular iteration of the Fulbright competition in 2017 and 2018. And really, if you're interested in teaching English abroad, this is a really good way of doing it. It's helpful to have teaching experience. If you don't, I would suggest that you volunteer tutoring, or in your area of study, if you're advanced enough, see if you can do a TA-ship for a class. I mean, really go to the departmental chair of your major or majors and see if that's a possibility. And once again, limited experience in the host country. Now, let's take a closer look at the study research options. So you get a full year funded. There's often named partnership awards. For example, in Oxford, I think they have 2 slots every year for study options from the United States. If, let's say, you're studying through Fulbright and you finish your year, and it's a 2-year master's program, you can actually reapply to Fulbright, not the extensive application that you put together, but you can file for an extension, and most extensions are granted if you have a legitimate reason. And grantees, you see, it covers tuition. You have to pay for tuition if there is tuition. A lot of European countries, for example, don't charge tuition. But Fulbright would cover these other costs that I mentioned before for general coursework. And of course, if you're doing research, you can have an independent project starting from the bottom moving up, or a capstone project, or a senior thesis, a master's thesis, or up to a dissertation. Let's turn to the ETA award. Well, actually, continuing on with the study research grants, for each type of grant, whether it's a research study or for ETA, you have to have a project statement or a study plan. And usually this is a 1-page single-spaced statement, and they really want well-developed ideas. And in your statement, they want to see that you've reached a high level of academic achievement. What's interesting, though, is that there's no GPA requirement for Fulbright. Of course, it doesn't hurt to have really good grades, but it also does not eliminate you from doing well in a Fulbright competition if you have average grades. Once again, you should have proficiency in the language if that's required of the grant. They're really looking for motivated, enthusiastic student leaders, so that should really come across in your statement, and someone who's engaged in their community, because when you go abroad, once again, going back to this idea that you're a representative of the United States with your own views of your home country, but you're there to create mutual understanding. So you're a diplomat of sorts. So they want you to be engaged academically, intellectually, but also meaningfully with the community that you'll be staying with. So it's often good to put in your statement how you're going to do these things. Now, the English teaching assistantship is quite different. You are abroad, once again, to create this mutual understanding, but also to improve the students, typically middle school or high school students, sometimes at the college or university level, but you're there to teach and help improve English. So you really have to demonstrate in your project statement that you have excellent communication skills. So how to use a PowerPoint effectively, for example, or are you a good writer? That comes across in your statement, right? And they also want you to be flexible, adaptable, and be a really open person. And I think if you apply for Fulbright, you're probably one of these people anyways, but they want enthusiastic leaders, and you want that to come across in your application. So if you've engaged in community service or service here at Hood College, make sure, don't sell yourself short. You want to show that you're a leader, you're a good communicator, and you're a hard worker, and you'll do that with your students abroad and in a creative fashion. Maybe you play an instrument and you'd share that in your classroom, or you do arts or dance, or you're really innovative in doing math lessons. Make sure you mention that kind of thing. Now, there are some different ways to connect with Fulbright. They have a very big social media program, but one thing that you want to do is go to the Fulbright.gov and look under the student Fulbright, and you can see that there'll be a drop-down menu by region and then country and what type of awards. Once again, whether it's for the ETA, so the English Teaching Assistantship, or the research and study. So I mentioned that there was a project statement. There's also a personal statement, also a page long. A third part of the application is a online application that you would start from the website that I mentioned before. And all three parts do take some time. In fact, the timeline for applying for a Fulbright is at the end of your junior year. So you work on it over the summer leading into your senior year. And typically they're due the first week in October. Sometimes the application deadline varies, so we'll have to keep an outlook on that. But then you hear, usually by March, if you're a finalist. And if you are, then you go for 8 to 12 months following graduation. So I know that's a little confusing, but usually major grants work this way because they have to go through thousands of applications, and they're looking for young professionals that are freshly minted graduates and want more international experience, whether it's through research, study, or teaching. Now, I just wanted to give a brief overview, and I couldn't cover all of the topics, but if you want to set up an appointment with me or learn more, if you have other questions, once again, I'm Dr. Pinczakowski, and my email is pinczakowski@hood.edu. And just so you know, if you decide to apply for a Fulbright, I'm here for you as a resource. I will help you read through drafts of your project statement and your personal statements, as well as your online application. So I hope you consider applying for a Fulbright. It really is a wonderful opportunity to go abroad.